Welcome back, Sebastian here. So moving on to Ferrari, second in the Constructors' Championship after 6 races. Now for the Scuderia, I think a pretty positive start to the 2024 F1 season. Of course, they have a race win under their belt, where at this time last year they of course did not. But it's been, an interesting year. 3 drivers, that's definitely something that they weren't planning on so far. And I think in many respects they've definitely taken a step forward and a step closer to Red Bull. So first, taking a look at their race-by-race results. So Bahrain, Sainz third, Leclerc fourth. Leclerc, of course, struggled quite a bit with brake issues all race. Saudi Arabia, Leclerc third. Sainz pulls out of the weekend after Friday practice with appendicitis. Oliver Behrman makes his Formula One debut, qualifies 11th, and finishes in 7th. Leclerc finishes third. And then we get to Australia. Sainz, epic comeback from his appendicitis on such short notice, wins the Grand Prix, obviously benefiting from Verstappen's brake issues, but Leclerc follows him home for a Ferrari 1-2. Then we get to Japan, Sainz third, Leclerc fourth. China, Leclerc fourth, Sainz fifth. Miami, Leclerc third, Sainz fifth. So for Leclerc, really good start to the season, finished in the top 4 every Grand Prix that we've had so far, and for Sainz has finished top 5 in all of them. Now when we look at the drivers head to head, you kind of have to get a bit creative with this, so I basically omitted Leclerc's results from Saudi Arabia because Sainz was not competing that weekend. So for Leclerc, he has 98 points total, but in just the races against Sainz, it's 82 for Leclerc, 83 for Sainz. So Sainz actually has the advantage there. Average finishing position though, Leclerc does have the advantage, and some of the results in the sprint do help him here. 3.29 for Leclerc, 3.86 for Sainz, but very, very close there. Average starting position, 4.43 for Leclerc, 4.29 for Sainz. So Sainz actually has the better starting positions in qualifying, which is a bit of a surprise given that over the course of their 3.5 years as teammates together, Leclerc has generally been the better qualifier. That being said, in the qualifying head-to-head, it is 3-2 in favor of Leclerc, but when you look at the qualifying delta, the average margin, it's 0.035 in Sainz's favor. So very, very close there. And last year, after 2023, it was 0.051, so 0.05 of a second. So generally, these two drivers, we know, very, very close in qualifying, and at this point, it's slightly in favor of Sainz when you look at that particular stat. Now, when we look at my points above expected model, both drivers have had very good starts to the season. For Leclerc, a positive 6.51, for Sainz, positive 10.98. And this does use all of the races because it's not a head-to-head statistic, it's simply a probabilistic score that kind of accumulates over all the races they've participated in. When we look at percentages, 108% for Leclerc, 117% for Sainz, both of them doing a really good job. And of course, Ferrari's bulletproof reliability, no DNFs from the main Grand Prix so far, has really helped in that respect. Now when we look at Ferrari, the constructor, it's a bit of a positive turnaround from how things were going at the midpoint of 2022. Now 2022, of course, 554 points. After the first quarter of the season, 157 points, which is actually less than what they had now, but of course, longer season, more sprints, so that obviously had an effect there. They did end up second in the constructors, but their average pole gap was 0.094 seconds, so less than 1/10 of a second on average, which was fastest, which was best over the course of the whole year. Of course, through the first, I would say, half of the year, their season was really marked by really being unable to capitalize on their one-lap speed and the opportunities, imploding on several occasions as well. 2023, of course, was a bit of a rebuilding year after the Technical Directive 39. They didn't have a particularly well-optimized car concept, so they were basically driving around a pretty flawed car for the whole year. They still ended up with 406 points after a bit of a tricky start with only 78 in the first quarter of the season. They ended up third in the constructors, just behind Mercedes, very, very close in the end, and their average pole gap was 0.232 seconds, which was still second behind Red Bull. Now 2024, 187 points, second in the constructors so far, average pole gap 0.345 seconds, which has actually increased from last year. But that being said, it does feel like Red Bull has certainly taken a step forward in qualifying, but it does feel like Ferrari's much closer in the races, and if if Red Bull have issues like they did in Miami, where it feels like they didn't perfectly nail the setup, they were just having issues with the car. It does feel like this year at least, Red Bull or Ferrari and McLaren can at least challenge Red Bull compared to last year, where even on a bad weekend for Red Bull, bar Singapore, they were still pretty much untouchable. So it does feel like they're a little bit behind in one lap pace still, but in the race pace, I do feel like they're much closer to Red Bull. And I think, for the rest of this year, I think the goal is obviously going to be second in the Constructors. I don't think winning the Constructors is really realistic unless, for whatever reason, Red Bull's updates from Imola bomb completely, and Ferrari's updates are absolutely amazing, and they're basically become the fastest team suddenly overnight. Obviously, we'd have a very different story if that actually happened, but as things stand right now, I think really for them the most realistic target is finishing second, beating McLaren in the Constructors. I think second in the Drivers' Championship may be in play as well. It really depends on how Red Bull develop and how Sergio Perez drives through the European rounds of the season. But there you go. There's my look at Ferrari for the first quarter of 2024. And of course, compared to some of the other teams, they don't have any questions with their driver lineup. They've already set their driver lineup. It'll be Leclerc and Hamilton next year. Of course, a lot of people are very excited about that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.